Welcome students to the UGC lecture series on pathophysiology of various diseases. In this lecture series, we'll be discussing the pathogenesis of various disorders. And to start with, today we'll discuss the pathophysiology of hypertension. To begin with, the science of pathophysiology deals with the study of pathogenesis and etiology of various diseases. Etiology is concerned with the causative factors behind various disorders, while as pathogenesis deals with the progress and prognosis of various diseases. So, students, hypertension is a disorder in which there is rise of blood pressure above the normal levels. International Society of Hypertension and the Joint National Action Committee of WHO has classified hypertension into various groups. Depending on that, the normal blood pressure is considered to be 120 of systolic blood pressure and 80 of diastolic blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure is the one which is recorded when ventricles are in a contracting phase, while as diastolic blood pressure is the one which is recorded when the ventricles and the heart are in a relaxing phase. Now, based on this classification, if the blood pressure goes above 130 by 85, then it is classified as normal blood pressure. A blood pressure beyond 140 by 60 is classified as hypertension. Now, hypertension has also been categorized into three phases. Stage 1 is referred as mild hypertension, which ranges between 140 to 160 of systolic blood pressure and 85 to 90 of diastolic blood pressure. A blood pressure beyond 160 but below 180 is referred as moderate hypertension, and a blood pressure beyond 180 but below 210 is referred as severe hypertension. There is one more category of hypertension, that is malignant hypertension, in which the systolic blood pressure is above 200 and diastolic blood pressure is above 120. Now, in certain cases, only systolic rise in blood pressure is seen, and this is referred as systolic hypertension. Hypertension as a whole is classified into two groups, that is malignant and benign hypertension and essential and secondary hypertension. In case of essential or primary hypertension, there is no known cause for this hypertension. It is idiopathic in nature. While as in case of secondary hypertension, the underlying cause may be some other disease in some other organ of the body, for example kidneys, heart, nervous system, etc. 90 to 95% of cases are essential hypertension, that is, they belong to the primary category, while as only 5 to 10% of cases belong to the secondary hypertension or the ones which are caused by some other underlying disease. Similarly, benign hypertension is found in almost 90 to 95% of patients, while as malignant hypertension is found in only 5 to 10% of patients. In case of benign hypertension, there is moderate rise in blood pressure over a prolonged period of time, while as in case of malignant hypertension, there is a rapid and marked rise in blood pressure, which often leads to other severe complications. If left untreated, malignant hypertension can reduce the life expectancy to less than 2 years once it has been detected. Overall, blood pressure is dependent upon two major factors, that is cardiac output and total peripheral vascular resistance. These are the two main hemodynamic forces that govern the rise in blood pressure. Cardiac output is in turn dependent upon many other factors like heart rate, contractility, filling pressure, and this filling pressure in turn depends upon venous tone and the blood volume. On the other hand, the total peripheral vascular resistance depends upon the arteriolar volume. Any changes in any of these factors leads to a rise in either total peripheral resistance or cardiac output, which in turn causes a rise in blood pressure. Kidneys have a prominent role in determining the blood pressure of a person, and the renin-angiotensin system is one system which has a very major and significant role in determining the blood pressure. Renin-angiotensin system consists of an alpha-2 globulin, that is angiotensinogen, which is present in the liver, which is synthesized in the liver and is released in the blood circulation. Now the renin which is a proteolytic enzyme present in the granules of juxtaglomerular cells, leads to the metabolism of angiotensinogen and converts it into angiotensin 1, which is an inactive form. Now, angiotensin 1 within the blood circulation upon reaching the lungs is acted upon by the angiotensin converting enzyme, and this angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, which is the most potent natural vasoconstrictor of the body. Angiotensin 2 leads to more and more secretion of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex, which in turn causes retention of sodium and water in the body. Angiotensin 2 also leads to vasoconstriction by virtue of its being the most potent vasoconstrictor, and this vasoconstriction also leads to a rise in blood pressure. Apart from these effects, angiotensin 2 also leads to a rise in the sodium and water levels inside the body. Because of this retention of salt and water, there is an increase in the blood volume. And increase in blood volume leads again to the increase in cardiac output, which in turn leads to a rise in blood pressure. Apart from these effects, one more effect of the renin-angiotensin system is the release of certain vasodilator substances in the body. For example, prostaglandins, particularly prostaglandin E2 and prostaglandin F2, and other vasodilator substances like kallikrein-kinin urinary system comprising of bradykinin and platelet activating factor. These factors lead to vasodilatation and a decrease in blood pressure. So all these factors collectively have an impact on the overall blood pressure scenario of the human body. Primary or essential hypertension is affected by genetic factors, racial and environmental factors, factors leading to the modification of the course of the disease. Similarly, secondary hypertension is either caused by a disease in the kidneys when it is known as renal hypertension, or by a disease in the liver when it is referred as portal hypertension, or by a disease in the nervous system when it is referred to as the neurogenic hypertension. Now, so far as the genetic factors affecting the essential or primary hypertension are concerned, it has long been suspected that there is some hereditary basis to the hypertension, and this has been evidenced by the fact that familial aggregation has been found. Hypertension has been found in twins. There are certain epidemiological data and experimental animal studies in which the genetic basis of hypertension has been established. And last but not the least, identification of hypertension susceptibility gene or angiotensinogen gene has also been identified. Similarly, when we look at the racial and environmental factors, it has been observed that hypertension is found more in the black population than in the white population, which shows its racial significance. Then other environmental factors include obesity, salt intake, people who have some skilled occupation, people who are in a higher living standards, and people who are leading a sedentary and stressful lifestyle. Then there are certain factors which modify the course of disease, and among them, age is one of the important ones. It has been observed that if hypertension is detected at an early age, and if it is left untreated, the life expectancy gets reduced substantially. Similarly, the sex is another factor, and it has been seen that females fare better as compared to males if suffering from hypertension. The third factor is the atherosclerosis. It has been invariably observed that essential hypertension is mostly accompanied by atherosclerotic plaques. Atherosclerosis refers to the narrowing of blood vessels due to deposition of fats and other atherosclerotic plaques. And there are certain factors which contribute to the development of atherosclerosis, like smoking, alcohol intake, high cholesterol levels in the blood, glucose intolerance, obesity, etc. Now, the basic pathogenic mechanisms behind essential hypertension include: number one, there is an increase in catecholamine levels. Number two, there is an increase in blood volume. It could either be due to arteriolar volume increase or due to increase in vascular constriction. And third factor is there is increase in cardiac output, and fourth factor is that there is either a low renin hypertension or high renin essential hypertension. Low renin essential hypertension is seen in case of 20% patients, and it refers to decreased responsiveness of the body towards renin secretion. While as high renin essential hypertension is seen in only 5 to 10% patients, and this refers to decreased responsiveness towards angiotensin II. Now when we look at the secondary hypertension, or the one which is caused by some other underlying disease in the body, we observe that the first type is the renal hypertension, which is caused as a result of disease in the kidneys, underlying disease of the kidneys. The disease could affect either the renal blood vessels or it could affect the renal parenchyma. Renal vascular disease could be either due to occlusion of the major renal arteries, or it could be due to preeclampsia or eclampsia, in which there is vasculitis or inflammation of blood vessels of arteries leading to their damage and destruction. Or it could also be due to some tumor of the renal blood vessels, or due to some other disease affecting the renal blood vessels. Similarly, the renal parenchymal disease could be as a result of glomerulonephritis, interstitial nephritis, polycystic kidney disease, diabetic nephropathy, or it could be due to renin secreting tumors. So here we need to appreciate the fact that diabetic nephropathy is also one of the major causes of renal hypertension. Now, so far as the activation of renin-angiotensin system is concerned, renin secretion is enhanced in the body whenever there is depletion of sodium, or whenever there is depletion of fluid, or there is low absorption of potassium. Given these conditions, there is a net decrease in the renal blood flow, that is, there is renal ischemia, and this leads to a decreased glomerular filtration rate. Whenever there is decreased glomerular filtration rate, this leads to more and more expression of renin and more conversion of angiotensin I to angiotensin II. Angiotensin II in turn leads to more and more secretion of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex. Aldosterone causes retention of sodium and water and increases the blood volume. Similarly, there are certain receptors on the aortic arch of the heart which sense any changes in blood pressure, and those baroreceptors or the pressure sensing receptors are present on the aortic arch and carotid sinus. Any decrease in blood pressure leads to activation of these receptors, which in turn leads to more and more expression of sympathetic outflow, and this causes an activation of alpha receptors present on the blood vessels and beta 1 receptors present on the heart muscles. Activation of alpha 1 receptors in turn leads to more and more vasoconstriction, while as activation of beta 1 receptors leads to more and more heart rate and contractility. This clubbed together leads to a rise in blood pressure. So there is the homeostatic mechanism which restores any alterations in blood pressure back to normal levels, which is mainly governed by the renin-angiotensin system. Now, so far as the management of hypertension is concerned, we have several modalities and strategies available for this purpose. Several drug classes are available. Some of them are first-line therapy, while as the others are used as a combination therapy. Among those which are used most frequently include diuretics, for example, thiazide diuretics, loop diuretics, and potassium-sparing diuretics. Thiazide diuretics include hydrochlorothiazide, chlorthalidone, indapamide. Loop diuretics include furosemide and bumetanide, while as potassium-sparing diuretics include spironolactone, amiloride, and triamterene. Then we have the calcium channel blockers, which include first generation calcium channel blockers like nifedipine, verapamil, diltiazem, and the second generation calcium channel blockers like felodipine, amlodipine, nistradipine, nitrendipine, etc. Among the vasodilators, we have hydralazine, minoxidil, diazoxide, and sodium nitroprusside. Sodium nitroprusside is both a venous and arteriolar dilator, whereas minoxidil and diazoxide are only venous dilators. Then the renin, we have the ACE inhibitors, which include captopril, ramipril, enalapril, lisinopril, etc. We also have angiotensin blockers that include losartan, irbesartan, candesartan. The another class of drugs is the beta blockers like propranolol, metoprolol, nidolol, pindolol, sotalol, etc. And cardioselective beta 1 blockers are specifically used, for example, esmolol, betaxolol, metoprolol, etc. Then we also have alpha 1 blockers like prazosin, terazosin, doxazosin, and alpha beta blockers like labetalol or carvedilol. And another group of drugs is those which act as neuronal inhibitors, for example, guanethidine, or which cause a catecholamine increase in ANS and CNS, for example, rizapine, or those which act as central hypotensive agents, for example, clonidine and alpha methyl dopa. So students, in today's lecture we have discussed the pathophysiology of hypertension, in which we have studied the various types of hypertension based on the classification given by International Society of Hypertension and Joint National Action Committee of WHO. We have observed that hypertension is basically of two types, primary and secondary. Essential, primary means essential, and secondary means because of some other underlying disease. Then blood pressure, which is benign in nature, and the one which is malignant in nature. With this, we come to the conclusion of the first lecture on pathophysiology of hypertension. Thank you very much.